Welcome back to Monitors Unboxed. Today it's time for a battle of the OLEDs, as I'll be pitting the brand new LG 27GR95QE up against the Alienware AW3423DW and AW3423DWF in an in-depth comparison. I suspect a lot of PC gamers, after a high-end HDR-capable gaming monitor, will be tossing up between these three flagship models. So let's dive in and see which one is the best option and how they compare in a range of performance metrics. First up, the specifications. The LG 27GR95QE is a 27-inch 2560 by 1440 W OLED panel with a maximum refresh rate of 240Hz. The Alienware AW3423DW is a 34-inch 3440 by 1440 ultra-wide QD OLED panel with a max refresh of 175Hz, and the AW3423DWF is a slightly cheaper variant of the DW model, packing the same QD OLED panel at 165Hz. Typically, we're seeing LG's OLED monitor priced at $1,000 US, the AW3423DW at $1,300, and the DWF at $1,100. But you can check the latest pricing via the links in the description. All are expensive monitors, but I think are fairly priced in today's market given their capabilities. One of the obvious differences between these products is the display size and format. The 27GR95QE is your regular flat 27-inch 16:9 monitor, a size and aspect ratio that's favoured by a lot of gamers. While the Alienware monitors are 34-inch curved 21:9 ultrawide monitors, offering additional width versus the 27-inch format, which can be more immersive for gaming. The easiest way to think of the differences here is that the 34-inch ultrawide is the same display height as the 27-inch LG at about 33 centimeters, but it offers an additional 21 centimeters of width, so it's basically an extension on the 27-inch size format. Both monitors also feature the same pixel density at approximately 110 ppi, so while the ultrawide is technically a higher resolution at 3440 by 1440 instead of 2560 by 1440, those extra pixels are simply for the additional width. Both options are 1440p class. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer here about which sort of monitor is best from a format perspective. I personally do like ultrawide monitors, but I know others are not a fan, in which case the decision between these two formats is pretty obvious. Desk size could be one consideration. The Alienware monitors take up more space, but I don't think buyers should be put off by its curve, which makes it slightly easier to see the edges and does increase its immersivity. The design of the three monitors does differ, but generally you're getting a premium experience, and from a style perspective I don't really have a preference here. The only two major considerations are that the AW3423DW uses white plastic versus darker shades for the DWF model and 27GR95QE, and that the LG model has a wider range of ergonomic adjustability, including a taller maximum height and the ability to use it in a portrait orientation. All three monitors have RGB LED lighting on the rear in varying places. LG's 27-inch OLED has superior connectivity. It packs DisplayPort 1.4 and two HDMI 2.1 ports with 48 gigabits per second of bandwidth, meaning that all ports can run the display at its full 1440p 240Hz. The Alienware monitors also use DisplayPort 1.4, but only use HDMI 2.0 instead of 2.1, meaning both are limited to just 100Hz over HDMI at their maximum refresh. The differences in HDMI also give the LG an edge for console gaming, as it supports HDMI 2.1 features and even the ability to run at 4K 120Hz over HDMI with automatic downscaling to 1440p. Ultrawides aren't well supported by today's consoles, so for anyone that wants to pair their display with an Xbox Series X or S or PlayStation 5, I definitely get the 27GR95QE, not just because it has HDMI 2.1, but also because it's a more normal format. Also important to mention is fan noise. All three monitors use active cooling, meaning they have a small fan inside to keep their components nice and cool. While the LG model and Alienware DWF are both close to silent and only audible when you put your ear right up to the cooling vents, the DW model from Alienware is on the noisy side and has issues such as running the fan even when the display is in its sleep mode. I personally find the DW fan annoying, but luckily this behavior wasn't observed with the DWF variant. Screen coating is a contentious issue with the latest wave of OLEDs. The battle between glossy and matte finishes is heating up again. But in regards to the Alienware QD OLEDs versus the LG 27GR95QE, my opinion on this one is pretty straightforward in that the LG monitor has the clearly superior screen coating. LG has gone with a matte anti-glare finish, while Dell have opted for a glossy anti-reflective coating, but in most conditions I think LG's matte finish is more effective. This is largely because the glossy coating with the Alienware monitors is poor and completely different to the great glossy coatings you might see from an LG OLED TV or your smartphone. While somewhat effective at reducing mirror-like reflections, the glossy nature of the Alienware means that you still do see defined reflections at times, especially if the room you're using it in is well lit. For example, I can typically see my own reflection in the Alienware when viewing dark content in a bright room, which is not the case with the LG monitor's matte finish, which eliminates mirror-like reflections. Usually the benefit to glossy coatings is that while you do see defined reflections, diffuse reflections are eliminated, the opposite of a matte coating. But with these Alienware displays, this isn't the case either. The glossy finish here actually reflects more ambient light than the LG's matte coating under the same lighting conditions in my office, which is lit via overhead downlights. The Alienware is basically giving you the worst of both worlds here, defined mirror reflections and diffuse ambient light reflections, which hurt the QD-OLED's ability to show deep, rich blacks in brighter ambient lighting environments. If you are using these displays in a brightly lit room, if there are light sources directly in front of the display, or if you can't control room lighting very well with blinds, the LG 27GR95QE's coating is significantly superior and shows deeper blacks, less ambient light reflection, and no defined reflections. In a dimly lit room with some ambient light, or if you can optimize light in the room by putting light sources behind the display or using blinds, the two monitors look pretty similar, but I'd give the edge to the Alienware as it will have no coating related grain, and generally ambient light reflection is minimal or eliminated in these conditions, leading to a richer and clearer look versus the matte WOLED. In a dark room like gaming with the lights off, there is almost no difference between the two options, with a slight advantage to QD-OLED as it will have no coating related grain. Both the LG WOLED and QD-OLED panels have issues with text rendering. This is because WOLED uses an RWGB subpixel layout with an additional white subpixel to increase brightness, while QD-OLED uses triangle RGB. Neither of these are the standard RGB stripe layout that operating systems like Windows expect, so modern subpixel font rendering techniques that are optimized for RGB layouts are incompatible with RWGB and triangle RGB, leading to bad results. And currently it's not possible to correct for either subpixel layout in software, at least in Windows 11. The artifacts from WOLED's RWGB when viewing text are typically a bit of blurriness and almost shadowing relative to a standard RGB stripe like you might get with an IPS LCD. Text just lacks the usual crispness I'd expect from a 1440p display of this size. The artifacts from QD-OLED's triangle RGB are pink and green fringing below and above the text, which also reduces the apparent clarity of the display and makes it appear like chroma subsampling or some other sort of compression technology is being used. While neither are very good outcomes, based on my experiences with both, I prefer the QD-OLED's triangle RGB layout. I think the green/pink fringing issue is less noticeable during everyday usage than the shadowing from RWGB when viewed at the same distance. However, in general, I would not recommend either OLED for desktop productivity usage or for long stints of using desktop apps like web browsers. The occasional jump into a web browser between gaming sessions or watching videos is going to be fine, but for longer usage in text-heavy apps, LCDs are preferable. Also, using desktop apps with static elements for long periods of time runs you into the risk of permanent burn-in with all OLED display types, so it's best to avoid this. Both the Alienware and LG monitors have various burn-in mitigation techniques like screen shifting and pixel refreshing to help combat this, but it isn't going to be the perfect solution and it may still happen. There have been some claims that QD-OLED is supposed to have greater longevity in regards to burn-in versus WOLED, but so far these claims are unproven. The biggest consideration around burn-in is more the warranty and guarantees that each company provides, and this is where the Alienware monitors have a clear advantage. For both the DW and DWF models, Dell offers a 3-year limited warranty that includes burn-in. LG only offers a 2-year warranty with no specific mention of burn-in, so if burn-in is a concern and you want the peace of mind that a warranty can bring, buying an Alienware QD-OLED is the way to go. In terms of response time performance, there is effectively no difference between WOLED and QD-OLED. Both are extremely fast technologies and offer the full benefit of OLED, meaning response times in the sub 0.5 millisecond range. There are a few small differences between how the two technologies operate in practice. The LG W OLED is a little faster tuned, but with a small amount more overshoot. But for actual gaming, the difference is negligible and both are elite for speed. While response times are the same, the main difference between the two monitors for motion performance is in refresh rate. With OLEDs and LCDs, both sample and hold displays, the higher the refresh rate, the clearer objects in motion will appear as there's less sample and hold blur. This gives a clear advantage to the LG 27GR95QE, as it offers a maximum refresh rate of 240Hz versus 175Hz for the Alienware DW and 165Hz for the DWF. In side-by-side comparisons using the UFO test, you can clearly see that the LG model delivers a clearer image when all monitors are set to their maximum refresh rate. Performance is very similar at the same refresh rate, so if you're playing a game at say 120 FPS on all monitors, you should see the same sort of clarity, but the extra refresh rate does give the LG monitor an advantage when you're maxing out the display. Based on what I've seen, I'd say the Alienware QD OLEDs are similar to a 240Hz LCD in motion clarity, while the LG monitor gets very close to a 360Hz IPS. Competitive gamers that need that extra clarity should choose the LG. As the refresh rate is higher, the 27GR95QE also has an advantage in input lag. This is because when you increase the refresh rate, the time each frame is shown on screen decreases, which also decreases the gap between inputs from your keyboard and mouse and output on the display. A 240Hz OLED like this LG has around a 1 millisecond advantage on the AW3423DWF, which doesn't sound like much, but along with increased smoothness, does make the LG feel more responsive to use. The elephant in the room here is the AW3423DW's input lag, which is a lot higher than the DWF and LG models. For some reason, this variant's implementation of the G-Sync module increases the processing delay to nearly 5 milliseconds versus 0.3 milliseconds for the other OLEDs. Latency-sensitive gamers will probably want to opt for a different product as a result. For color performance, the QD OLED panel is wider gamut, covering 80% of the Rec 2020 gamut versus 73% for the 27GR95QE. This gives the QD OLED higher coverage of both DCI-P3 and Adobe RGB, meaning it would be superior for productivity work in those color spaces, but because I don't really recommend an OLED as a creator monitor, at least not these ones, it's not that relevant. But as HDR10 does use a wide color gamut, the QD OLED's superior coverage does give it an edge for HDR content consumption. What's also important with these wide gamut monitors is we look at factory calibration, not just how it ships, but also any relevant sRGB modes that might be useful for SDR. In the default modes, none of these displays ship with an sRGB clamp for SDR usage, so all three will be oversaturated to some degree for SDR content. While the larger color gamut of the QD OLEDs means that there's more oversaturation by default, they're actually more accurate overall due to other factors. The big one being white balance. Alienware ships their products with a much closer to correct D65 white point, whereas the LG monitor is well off with more like 8500K on average. This means the LG will look bluer and colder by default. The Alienware models also have better sRGB modes. All have restrictions to what settings can be changed in the sRGB mode, but the Alienwares, in particular the AW3423DWF, ship with the most accurate grayscale performance and better results for saturation and color checker as well. This means for regular SDR usage, the QD OLED options are better. However, the LG monitor supports hardware calibration, whereas the Alienware models do not, so for those that have access to calibration hardware like a colorimeter, it will be possible to achieve superior results on the LG than on the Alienwares, so that's something to keep in mind. Just be aware that it requires an expensive tool to produce accurate results which won't be accessible to everyone. There is no doubting that QD OLED has superior brightness in the SDR mode to WOLED. The AW3423DW and DWF are about 30% brighter, which makes them somewhat more usable in brighter conditions. However, neither technology is especially bright relative to an LCD, and in good news, none of these models have an automatic brightness limiter in their SDR modes, so you won't see any weird behavior for desktop apps, provided you switch off HDR in Windows when outside of videos or games, which I would recommend on an OLED so that you avoid ABL problems. Generally, I'd say viewing angles are similar between these monitors, although the LG being flat does make it easier to view at off angles horizontally. Uniformity though, I found to be better on the QD OLED. My 27GR95QE had a bit of a dirty screen effect when viewing mid to dark greys, which wasn't present on the AW3423DW. HDR performance is crucial of course, as many buyers will be choosing between these monitors specifically for HDR. As both use OLED tech, they are fundamentally very similar, as they both have per pixel local dimming and zero black levels, leading to an excellent ability to show bright and dark content on screen at the same time. The only thing that will really affect black levels between the models for HDR content are the screen coatings, which I discussed earlier. Outside of that, the QD OLED Alienware monitors do have some advantages. Under most conditions, the AW3423DW and DWF are brighter than the LG model. This is true for small window sizes such as 5 and 2%, as well as for larger window sizes above 25%. The QD OLED panel is able to sustain higher brightness as a result across the entire image, as well as dial in higher brightness for the finest on-screen elements like lights or stars. However, the W OLED panel has a brightness advantage for mid-range window sizes between 10 and 25%, whereas QD OLED drops pretty substantially between its 2% window performance and 10% window performance. Higher brightness is also generally the case for QD OLED in real-world scenes, although this can vary. In scene 1, we saw 15% higher brightness on the LG model relative to the DW. In scene 2, there was a large discrepancy, with the DW recording 30% higher brightness, but the DWF was 9% dimmer than the LG, which is a result of different HDR calibration that we'll look at shortly. For gaming, I saw up to a 75% brighter result for the Alienware QD OLEDs, and this was also true for another HDR video scene that I haven't made into a chart yet. A fifth real scene result had both OLEDs producing similar brightness. But overall, based on these results and the window size testing, I do believe that Alienware monitors will be better for HDR brightness and show more dazzling highlights when run in their best performing modes. It's a different story for HDR accuracy though. While the LG model is dimmer, it's generally the more accurate product that more closely follows the correct EOTF tracking curve. For example, here we're looking at 10% window performance in the best modes for each monitor. The LG has the best roll-off behavior, whereas the DW is a bit less tight at the top end and the DWF a bit less tight at the bottom end. The Alienware QD OLEDs are also more susceptible to weirdness with EOTF tracking. For example, the DW model using the brighter HDR 1000 mode at a 25% APL showed weird tracking results, as did the DWF model using its brighter mode basically all of the time. Meanwhile, the LG monitor's default HDR configuration was rock solid, and even performance at a 25% APL still adhered reasonably well to the correct EOTF curve. On the other hand, the DW QD OLED had the best saturation tracking, although the LG isn't too far behind, so overall, like I said, the LG is the more accurate but dimmer HDR monitor in most conditions. When we assess all areas to performance, we do see some interesting differences between the LG 27GR95QE and the Alienware AW3423DW and AW3423DWF. But before I give my thoughts on which model I think is the best, there are some noticeable areas that may immediately decide which model is better for you before we look at the nitty-gritty. For example, if you don't like ultrawides, the Alienwares are out of the question and the LG model is going to be a good substitute. If you hate matte screen coatings, then the Alienware model's glossy finish may tempt you across. If you require a high level of brightness, then the QD OLEDs will deliver the highest brightness for SDR and HDR usage. But if you hate fan noise, then the AW3423DW specifically will be a turnoff. The LG is also the only model with HDMI 2.1 and 4K downscaling support, so console gamers could easily dismiss the Alienware models from contention. For those that are on the fence though, here's where the main strengths and weaknesses lie. The LG 27GR95QE is a normal screen format and a typical monitor size, so it's best suited to traditional desk setups or those that don't have a ton of space but still want to enjoy OLED. It has the superior screen coating for most people, especially those who want to use the monitor in moderate to bright environments. It has a higher maximum refresh rate, leading to better motion clarity and lower input latency when the refresh rate is maxed out, making it better for competitive multiplayer gaming and giving it similar motion clarity to a 360Hz IPS LCD. It supports hardware calibration if you want to properly fine-tune performance without relying on software profiles, and it's the more accurate monitor from the factory for HDR performance, specifically EOTF tracking. LG includes proper HDMI 2.1 support, making it the better product for console gamers. It's also the cheaper monitor at $1,000 US, though it's still not especially cheap. However, this LG variant is dimmer than QD OLED monitors for SDR and most HDR usage, sometimes substantially dimmer. LG's tuning from the factory is less accurate for SDR usage, and the white balance is quite significantly off by default. The subpixel layout is inferior, leading to worse text clarity when viewed from the same distance as QD OLED. I experienced some dirty screen effect that wasn't present on the Alienwares. LG also offers the worst warranty for burn-in, only covering buyers for 2 years and not specifically mentioning burn-in, which isn't great for an expensive product. The Alienware AW3423DW is the more immersive monitor due to its ultra-wide aspect ratio. Its glossy coating is optimized for use in darker environments where you won't see as much matte grain or diffuse reflections. Its QD OLED panel has the better subpixel layout, which leads to better text rendering, though neither OLED is well suited to desktop use as there are burn-in concerns. The DW is also typically the brighter monitor for both SDR and especially HDR use, and comes better calibrated from the factory for SDR with a more accurate white point and better sRGB mode. Alienware offers a much better warranty that lasts for 3 years and specifically mentions burn-in, giving buyers more peace of mind surrounding that concern. However, the DW model has a few specific issues such as fan noise, high input lag, and a lack of upgradable firmware. It's the most expensive of the three options, 30% more pricey than the LG. It lacks some features like HDMI 2.1 and hardware calibration, plus it has some jankiness when it comes to HDR accuracy. The biggest weakness relative to the LG is probably its refresh rate, which is lower and leads to worse motion clarity, though both are still impressively clear relative to most LCDs. The Alienware AW3423DWF is basically the same as the DW model, except some of the weaknesses such as fan noise and input lag are eliminated. Dell has also reduced the price by $200, making it cheaper than the DW and just 10% more than the LG offering. However, this comes at the cost of a slightly lower refresh rate and worse HDR accuracy. While I believe Dell are working on a software update to fix the DWF's HDR performance, it hasn't been released yet. On the balance of everything, I personally would choose one of the QD OLED ultra-wide monitors over the LG 27GR95QE. I think the higher peak brightness of the DW and DWF is a really key selling point, and I appreciate the panel's superior text rendering and better uniformity. I'm also an ultra-wide fan and I do appreciate the extra immersiveness, but that wasn't a significant factor in choosing it over the LG. More of a factor for me was Alienware's superior warranty, which I think is crucial for a monitor that does have a risk of burn-in. 2 years on the LG side is too short for a premium product. But it's a pretty close battle overall, and I still see plenty of reasons to buy the LG model, especially if you do a lot of competitive gaming and want to leverage the higher refresh rate. I also far prefer the LG's coding and really wish it were available for the QD OLED monitors, but ultimately, these two factors aren't enough to sway me across to the LG when the Alienware monitors do feature superior HDR hardware, which is really the reason why I would be buying an OLED. Anyway, that's it for this look at the Alienware models and the LG models in a head-to-head battle. If you do appreciate these sort of side-by-side comparison videos where we really dial in on 2 or 3 monitors and take a look at the strengths and weaknesses of them, then please do give the video a like and let us know in the comments below, because I do feel, especially in this sort of situation, that buyers genuinely will be trying to toss up between these two products, so I figured I'd just give my 2 cents on which of them is the better option. On top of this, we have links in the description below to check current pricing for all these monitors, and down there you'll find links to our Patreon and Floatplane accounts. So if you do want to support the channel directly, help us buy some of these monitors. We did buy the Alienware AW3423DW for this video, so we do always appreciate people that support our testing, and you'll get some cool bonuses there like access to our Discord community and our upcoming monthly live streams. So yeah, thanks for watching this one. Hope you enjoy. Subscribe to Monitors Unboxed, and I'll catch you in the next one.